finished it. Finally! And it's that sentiment which is what makes me hate binge watching. I think it's really exciting at first to be like, you mean I can watch it all right now? But just like stuffing your face with any delicious treat, eventually you start to feel a little bit sick. And that's what always happens with me with these freaking Netflix shows. I get so excited and I'm enjoying them so much, but toward the end it becomes a chore. They all meld together in like a giant cloud of, Daredevil-esqueness. And I just really wish that they would find another way to release the episodes, and then you feel like you're racing people and, you're trying to, beat spoilers on the internet. And I think it also makes for sloppy storytelling on the part of the show. Like, for instance, one problem that I had was that they had way too many reveals. They were like, ooh, we're going to wait to tell you about Elektra till the end of the season. And I'm like, yeah, well, because of that, you made Elektra unlikable for a good part of the season, or confusing. And, you had a really good, she's on my best list now because of that. And so is Stick. But, they saved it to the end. And so they have to realize that they're allowing their audience to cement emotions about the characters they're presenting, only for them to shatter them later on. And sometimes that's cool, but you can't do it all the time, because then you just start to be like, well, you don't trust your own emotions while watching the show. You're like, I don't know what I'm watching. It's probably all going to change by the end of the season. Now, I liked season 2. I want to make that clear. I thought it was good. It was better than most television. However, Marvel Netflix has set the bar very, very high. And they've proven with season 2 of Daredevil that even they cannot maintain that level of quality. And I have to say, I honestly do blame the showrunners. I think that Stephen S. DeKnight is sorely missed. I think because just think about Spartacus. I never watched Spartacus, but I've heard a lot of people talking about it. And, when he left that show, there were problems. And I think that with all due respect to Doug Petrie and Marco Ramirez, who took over, I think they're serviceable. And as I said, this is certainly better than a lot of television that's out there. But it's no Daredevil season 1. It's no Jessica Jones. It's no Fargo. And I think that these guys, Marvel hasn't found the right people to take over for Stephen S. DeKnight, and I think that they should continue to look for season 3 of Daredevil, although I do believe that Defenders will probably come next at this point, because, we still have Luke Cage, and then we have Iron Fist, and then probably Defenders, and Jessica Jones season 2 is on the back. It's been greenlit, but we don't have a date for it yet, but they just can't keep putting Defenders off, because pretty soon, with all these awesome crossovers, we're going to have de facto Defenders. I would also say, before I get into my, top list of best and worst, I think that the show suffered from Amazing Spider-Man 2 syndrome. And it's so sad for Spider-Man that that's now like the name of a movie that's too crowded. But, them's the breaks. They made it. And they also ended up labeling it. But I felt that there were just too many characters in this season. And I think that none of them, including old favorites like Wilson Fisk, got enough attention. And I think that the show has to be very careful about falling prey to fan service. I think you want to give the fans what they want, but at the same time you have to be the professional and say, well, you know what, I know that you want this, but I can't give it to you because it's going to bring everything down. And this always happens. Some entertainment, be it a movie or a TV show, tries to do fan service, gets everyone excited, and then the fans are like, well, honestly, that wasn't as good as before. And so it never works out for the creative teams who decide to give into that temptation. So that's my thoughts on it. But let's begin, because I did like this quite a bit, but it just paled in comparison to what we've seen so far. All right, so, if this had been season 1 of Daredevil, I do not think Marvel Netflix would be the big deal that it is. Although I feel very strongly that Luke Cage will probably get things back on track, because I really like that creative team. And at the end of this episode, there is a link to, an introduction to what's going on with the Luke Cage show. All right, so anyway, number 1, we have to give it to Charlie Cox. Charlie Cox continues to be the secret ingredient in Daredevil. It's hard to pull off a blind vigilante in red leather wearing a devil mask. And he makes it look so easy. I think it's easy to, think that that's not a hard job. But he pulls it off, and he's just absolutely spectacular. And also they ask him to do so many different emotions. Just think he's a roller coaster of emotions, every time we see him, but in this season as well. And Charlie Cox does all those emotional pivots perfectly, again, seemingly with ease. And he's just also really, really likable. I think men like him, women like him, everyone likes him, and he looks good with his shirt off. I had to say it, but because the show knows it as well, because they do it so often. And I just also think his acting is so good. It's easy to say, he's good at the stunts, or he looks good, but I think that the acting is the most important thing, and he gives such a soul to Daredevil, and Matt Murdock is supposed to be so tortured, and I think Charlie Cox portrays all that. And there are a couple sequences, particularly towards the end of this season. Well, I mean, we're going to talk about the Matt Elektra conversation for sure, but I think that Charlie Cox sold all of those, and it was fantastic. And also, I think Matt Murdock sometimes is very unlikable, but because Charlie Cox is playing him, it's hard to not like him. And I think that's the same problem that his friends have. But let's get next to number 2, and that's Foggy Nelson. I think that this season proved that Foggy is not only vital to Matt Murdock's life, but to the show. I finally, it's a little bit like Captain America's shield, right? Like, never understood Captain America's shield in the comics. Never understood Foggy in the comics. But when I've seen them in live action, both in sequels, by the way, Captain America the Winter Soldier for the shield, Daredevil Season 2 for Foggy, I finally understood their importance to the mythology and to the character. And I think that it was just, and I love the path that Foggy is taking. I'm very excited. He gets all upset with Matt Murdock, but just wait till he starts working for Hogarth. And I think that's a good thing to do with that character. I mean, we've heard that he and Matt also both worked, for a big law firm. And so it'll be interesting to see him get back into that world and what they're going to, because, Foggy's very rebellious. I don't see him fitting into that space for very long, unless he chooses to, maybe to help Daredevil with some kind of investigation. We'll see. But loved the character, think he's great, and he should just finally make it official with that other lawyer, because they seem like a fun match to me. But anyway, I liked Foggy, came around, huge Foggy fan now. All right. Third, so many things to like about this season. I had to double up on this one, and this is Elektra and Stick. But I think there's a reason to double up on them, because I think that the backstory that was revealed in the final 2 episodes about the characters ended up humanizing both of them. And I thought that was really spectacular. It made me like Stick more, it made me like Elektra more. And I also, we'll talk again. I actually, believe it or not, the conversation between Elektra and Matt on the stairwell is on my worst list, but you'll see why. I liked it, don't worry. But I thought that, as far as Elektra goes, I thought that changing her iconic death, and taking it out of the hands of Bullseye, I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. And I also feel that they've turned, she's always been like a Catwoman type character. I mean, there are archetypes in comics, right? But I think, Black Cat from Spider-Man, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel that they did a very good job with it here, and I appreciated that they kept the exoticness of Elektra. I mean, they could have done a lot of things with the character that were far more egregious than changing her iconic death. And I did like the line of hers asking Matt, "Does it always hurt this much to do good?" and him saying yes. I mean, that was just really spectacular. I really liked that a lot, and I came to really like their relationship at the end of the show, at the end of the season. And I, do feel like there's such an incredibly strong connection there, probably stronger than he'll ever have with anyone else, and Stick too. But Elektra, I think there's a romantic angle there, of course, which only strengthens it. And I loved seeing Elektra in that pot. Now we know what it's for, finally. In the red silk, right? Her traditional red silk from the comic. So perhaps the Hand are like, you don't need a functional costume. We want comics continuity here in the Hand. They're all secretly huge comic book fans. And then with Stick, actually, when he was being tortured under the fingernails, I had to look away. So kudos to the show for doing that good a job with that. But what I really liked about Stick, which made me really like the character, is when he hugged Matt and he said, "Matty, I'm proud of you." I think because Matt he said, "You're the strongest man I know." And he's a stronger man than Stick. And that was such a beautiful moment that it made me not only, again, like Stick more, but it made me understand the Stick and Matt Murdock relationship, which I think up until this point, I haven't really, gotten. So I think, I'm glad the show finally got there, but I think they need to work on getting there a couple steps too late, or beats too late. Then fourth, I gotta put the Punisher on the list, right? I have to say though, guys, I don't think the Punisher can have his own show. He's just a killing machine. I mean, unless he gets better at detective work or gets like an incredible supporting cast, I just think there are better candidates for their own show, like Elektra's Adventures with the Hand, or Fighting the Hand. I'd be more interested in something like that. I would also just be more interested in more seasons of these characters that we love. If you keep giving everyone their own spin-off show, it slows down the order of the seasons that we're getting, and I just would prefer to see Punisher show up in other people's shows, and I would like to, we'll get into that in just a moment as my number 5. So I just think watching him kill people, it was hard here, but it was supposed to be hard, but just watching him like viciously murder people with other people pointing him in the direction he's supposed to go in, I don't know how compelling that is. I did think Jon Bernthal did a fantastic job when he found that cache of weapons at the general's house. That was really cool. And I loved the vest. That was so neat. You could see this where the skull would go already. And then I was like, Frank, you're quite the artist. That's a very compelling skull that you've drawn on that on that vest. That was very cool. But I didn't think he looked so good on the rooftop for some reason. I think that Jon Bernthal has a slim build, and I think they tried to build him up in the shoulders with like some shoulder pads on that jacket for some reason to make him look similar to the way the character's been drawn in the comics. I would embrace Jon Bernthal's like sinewy build and just, Punisher doesn't cut a huge figure, a physical figure, but he certainly cuts a huge like mythological legendary figure. I mean, I think that's fine. I mean, some of my favorite moments with Jon Bernthal in the show was him in that baseball hat sitting in the diner, right? I mean, he's just such a cool character, and I love his face, just showing the pain on his face with those bruises healing, and he just looks battered. He almost looks like Darwin Cook drew him, and I think that's really fantastic. So I like the character quite a bit. Although also I would say that it's odd that the show is working so hard to get us to like feel sympathetic and cheer for murderers, right? They're like, Punisher, Elektra, they kill! Isn't it fun? And I'm like, you're making me feel a little guilty about this. All right, so there have to be some repercussions. Elektra certainly got hers to some degree, and she's trying to be better, but I don't really know how comfortable I feel rooting. And it's always a problem I've had with the comic as well, for what Punisher does. And I guess that's the point to some degree, but if it's going to be something that's mainstream entertainment, that tries to have a number of people enjoy it and can support its own show, you have to do a little bit of a sales pitch than he's got a freaking cool leather coat on, right? I mean, that's just not enough. Especially, although there's always been violence, but, the world is a scary place. But anyway, number 5. And I'm sure some people would say that gives more reason for the Punisher. But, the old eye for an eye argument. All right, so anyway, number 5. Crossovers. I loved seeing Hogarth show up. And I loved how Foggy was so oblivious to the crap storm that he's heading into. And I would like to see more of this. I appreciated a lot of you pointed out, but a lot of you pointed out the Mulaney and the DA were from Jessica Jones and stuff, and I'm like, I didn't even remember that. I mean, we need more crossovers that make a lasting impression, right? So I would like to see that happen more often. I would love to see, just like Luke Cage came over to Jessica Jones, and I feel bad that Jessica Jones isn't going to be on Luke Cage. I would love to see Foggy show up in Jessica Jones season 2, or on Luke Cage, when maybe he runs into Hogarth's law firm, because they said they're going after vigilantes, so that's Luke Cage, right? So I would love to see Foggy do a crossover. I'm sure that considering how popular these shows are and the media footprint that they have, they get covered a lot. Marvel Netflix can afford to pay for an actor to fly from wherever they are to New York City where they shoot these things for like 2 days to do a cameo. And I just think it's worth it. And I really like the cohesiveness that's building, and I want to see more of it. All right, so let's go to the worst list. The worst list starts out with Black Sky and Blacksmith. They're too similar, and I don't know anything about either one. There's too many unanswered questions here, and we're getting a backlog, right? Like more unanswered questions are coming down the pipeline, but we're not clearing the ones that are in front of us. So it's very frustrating. I still don't know what Black Sky is. There are 2 Black Skies because we had a Black Sky last season. Now Elektra's a Black Sky. I think that's a weird name for it. I'm like, because it's not descriptive. I mean, if it was like a military code name, I'd be like, you don't want it to be descriptive. But this is the Hand. I would think that the name would be somewhat more descriptive because they're so into mythology. So I think that's ridiculous. Then with Blacksmith, I think, that was like a real red herring. And the fact that the general was, there was no hints that the general, I hate that kind of stuff. If you can't go back and go like, yes, I see it now, it's bad. It's like, I think if the writers don't sow the seeds for the reveal, it's too much of a gotcha, and that's not good writing. So I really had a problem with that considerably. Now, some people arguing maybe that's not Blacksmith, maybe the general works for Blacksmith. Who knows? And I think to some degree, who cares? I still don't understand why Frank's family was in the middle of it. If he has a connection to Blacksmith personally, or people who work for Blacksmith personally, was that a hit? Were they like, hey Frank, why don't you go to the carousel today where we're having a huge drug meeting? It seems too coincidental then, right? The whole thing, there are so many questions, and I feel like the Punisher. I'm like, someone explain it to me. Karen, start researching. So that was frustrating. Then number 2, speaking of Karen, yes, unfortunately, at the end of the day, Karen ended up on my worst list. Why? Well, I don't know. I think she's a pretty good journalist, although I think the article that she ended up with was crap. I was like, all the cool things you uncovered. I thought she was going to out Matt Murdock, by the way. She's like, although apparently at that point she still didn't know, which we'll get to in a second. But I thought that the article that she ended up with, I would be like, you risked your life several times and made Ellison follow you all over New York City and risk his life for this opinion piece? I mean, it was ridiculous. If I were Ellison, I'd be like, yeah, this isn't working out. Maybe you should go find a third job. But then also, does Karen think that everyone has a crush on her? I mean, it was so unbelievable that I thought for sure she knew that Matt Murdock was Daredevil when he caressed her cheek when rescuing her from the hand, and he was like, "Are you okay, Karen?" And sounded exactly like Daredevil and had of Matt Murdock, and had the lower half of Matt Murdock's face. This is a man she's kissed. This is a man she's hung out with romantically and intimately at this point. I don't think they haven't slept together yet, but still, I would think that she would put two and two together and be like, "Why is he being so intimate with me? Oh my God, it's Matt." Instead, I guess she felt like, yeah, Punisher likes me, Daredevil likes me, Matt likes me, Foggy likes me, everyone likes me. I was like, that is a super unlikable position to take, Karen. So when Matt Murdock came into the office and he was like, "I'm Daredevil," I thought for sure she'd be like, duh. I thought she was going to ask Foggy about it at Josie's and be like, "Did you know he was Daredevil? Why didn't you tell me?" I was just really, really surprised, and it made no sense whatsoever. And just maybe dislike Karen all the more. All right, I've been on the fence, but she always pushes me back into the dislike category. Then number 3, I'm really upset, and I'm sure many of you are as well, that we did not get to see Elektra and Matt on the run. How awesome did that sound? I was like, I was genuinely like, I hope they get off this roof and get to the airport, because that sounds like an amazing place to pick up in the next time we see them, right? Who wouldn't love to open season 3 of their Defenders with Matt Murdock on a beach somewhere or in a European city with Elektra, and he's like, "I'm sorry, I just missed New York too much." I mean, that would be so cool. I mean, I know he loves New York, but the fact that he's never physically left New York, I mean, that seems a little bit odd to me. I know he had a very difficult childhood, so of course there are no family vacations, but I don't know. I mean, didn't Stick ever take him to train anywhere? I mean, Stick's certainly been all over. So, I mean, I almost would be like, you're bordering on some kind of psychosis, Matt, that you can't even step foot, like, you don't even want to go fruit picking in upstate, in like Connecticut or upstate New York? So I had a problem with that. But the way Matt Murdock pitched it and the Elektra wanting to believe it so badly, it was so great. It was so beautiful. I mean, we all know when someone says a speech like that it's likely not going to work out, but they jinxed it. But I felt it was so great, and I was rooting for them at that point so much. And I loved what he said to her about, "You're the only one who gets me." And I guess maybe he's trying to create that now with Karen, being like, well, Karen has a thing for vigilantes, so I'm going to get her to support me and say, "I'll wear it in bed." Who knows? But I just felt like Elektra did get him, and they made each other better, right? She made him stronger and edgier and not so soft, and he made her a better person. So I would have really liked to have seen that. So I'm disappointed that we didn't get to, and I'm upset that they introduced it only to take it away from me. All right, number 4. The fourth thing I didn't like about this season was the hand. I was really excited about the hand, but I think the hand just never lived up to their promise. I think that their ninjas were easily defeatable. Although I like that the ninjas eventually figured out that he, could not see. I thought that was good. And then I like that Stick, said, listen to their exhale, their breathing. Although the hand, by the way, we can talk about it because they didn't reveal it here, but the hand resurrect the dead, and then the dead fight for them and do their bidding. It's kind of like semi-slaves. So I'm surprised they were breathing. They didn't have a heartbeat, so I'm surprised they didn't breathe. They didn't breathe as well. It's like, well, if you can stop your heartbeat, because I thought they were dead. I thought that was the reason. But if you can, through the hand mojo, stop your heartbeat, well, then why don't you stop your sound of your exhaling or inhaling? I don't know. So I just didn't like them. I thought Nobu never lived up to expectations, and Stick took him out beautifully. But he was very easy to take out at the end of the day. I guess, only Stick was willing to go there. So, I don't know. I thought the hand, and also this big war with the hand and the chase, it never really seemed to materialize to me. They were like, I just never seemed like that big a deal. I still always felt like, you guys are exaggerating a little bit. Meh. All right, so the final thing that I didn't like, and I had a hard time coming up with the final thing that I didn't like, because overall, I did like the season quite a bit. But something that bothered me a lot, and so I put it in as number 5, and we already talked about the cinematography, was that I thought the fighting was weak. I thought that the fighting a lot of the times looked like they were literally just going through the motions, right? Like, it looked like almost a dance. And not a dance like in a beautiful way, but like a dance like rehearsal, right? Like, I mean, we've seen amazing fight sequences. We've seen some great fight sequences in season 1 of Daredevil. But I thought that here, especially on the roof at the end, when Nobu and Daredevil were fighting, when they were doing flips, so often I was like, I don't think you connected. And is that really you don't seem like you're, I felt like a lot of the fights people were fighting to a standstill. instead of trying to end the fight, right? Like, okay, like tennis almost. Like, okay, you kick, I kick, you kick, I kick, and then we'll have a pretty cool fight, right? I'm like, what about the emotional aspects of this fight? Matt and Elektra are fighting for their lives on this rooftop, and they don't seem like it, right? And they didn't seem to be trying to, like, just get away. They're like, why are we fighting them to the death? Let's just get off the roof. I mean, that's what I would think would be the number one goal, considering the conversation that they had. I know they wanted Elektra, but, catch me if you can. So I just thought that the fighting a lot of the times in this season just seemed fake. I didn't buy it as real. I wasn't on the edge of my seat, like, who's going to win this fight? Like, I thought that the Wilson Fisk fights were much better, both with Punisher and Matt Murdock in prison, than a lot of the ninja fights, and that shouldn't be happening. All right, so that's my review of Season 2. I'm very curious what your thoughts are on it. What did you like the best? What did you think was not so good? And then also, how do you feel about going forward with Marvel Netflix? Do you want to see Daredevil Season 3 before we get the Defenders? What do you think of the order? Do you want a Punisher standalone show, even if it means delaying the Defenders yet again? So I think that's also something that not only we have to consider, but obviously Marvel Netflix has to consider as well. All right, thank you for watching this season with me, and you can check out some other episodes right now.